From the beautiful city of Los Angeles, California, we bring you the Gimme Three podcast.
Welcome back, cinephiles, cinema lovers, movie appreciators, and of course, our family and friends to the Gimme Three podcast, a series for cinephiles. As you all know, or if you're new to this show, this is the podcast where we dive into 3 films connected by one theme. I'm Bella Efstratus, and I'm joined as always by my extraordinary co-host, Nicholas Ibarra. Nick, how are you doing today? Are you enjoying spooky season so far?
I'll say this. I haven't really gotten into much spookiness yet, but that I'm going to be changing that this week. Thus far, I've just been getting into, Joker world.
Yes.
Spoiler alert, but
spoiler.
I did see one movie called The Seventh Victim from the 40s, I think 40s or 50s, and I went to the little micro cinema at the Vista Theater, which is connected to Video Archives, the podcast that Quentin Tarantino hosts. And it's a really cute, 20-seat little theater. And they play movies there on VHS and or 16 millimeter. So it's a VHS screening of this classic noir film / horror film called The Seventh Victim. So that's was my first quote unquote horror film of the spooky season, but I will be watching a lot more spooky this week.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, it was fun. It's a fun little spot, fun little theater. And, if you haven't been yet, Pam's Coffee right next door. Great coffee, great staff. Good little place to write if you want to get your writing in. So it's they've done well there. They've done very well. I love
it. I have to check that out for sure.
How about you? I noticed on the letterbox you've been getting very spooky.
I've been getting really spooky. Obviously, this is my favorite time of the year. Yeah, I think to start it off, I have to say I had the privilege of seeing a childhood classic and also a family staple film in my family, which is Mel Brooks' Young Frankenstein.
Oh, hell yeah.
So that was honestly a magical moment. We watch it. That's probably my most watched movie of all time because we've watched it every year for Halloween basically since I was born. I tried to keep the tradition when I moved out to LA and tried to get my friends to watch it with me. Did not work. They did not get it. They did not like it. So it was really nice to experience this with a crowd who equally appreciates it as me and my family growing up with it.
Well, that's great to hear. And for your friends who didn't enjoy it, nobody's perfect,
Yeah, nobody's perfect. And I'm still holding out that they just didn't get it.
Yeah.
We'll try again. But yeah. And then yesterday I got to go see, I finally took my boyfriend to the New Beverly for the first time, popped his new Bev cherry. So that was awesome.
What do you think?
He loved it. He was like, this is so cool. So he was like, we're coming back for Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the end of the month. So I'll be there if you guys want to say hi. I'm super excited for that one. But I took him to see Evil Dead, which was hilarious.
Great. That's a great movie to pop your Bev cherry at because it is that is so Beverly, it's
right.
funny, scary,
so ridiculous.
Such a genre film. Like that place is made for that. That's a great experience. Good job.
It was
Good
so
job.
Fun. Thank you. I was proud. I was proud of him. But yeah, I'm excited. We've got a really, really fun, wicked lineup of spooky themes and horror movies coming your way this month on the Gimme Three podcast. Next week, in honor of Hispanic Heritage Month, we're dedicating an episode to 3 Hispanic horror films, which I'm super excited for. We're also going to have some incredible horror director spotlights this month with George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead trilogy and a 2-part series of horror movies directed by women featuring the return of a very special guest. So if you love horror movies, be sure to stay tuned for some more spooky delights. Anyways, we're kicking off this month with another tribute episode, but this time we're honoring a beloved fictional character. one who has graced the screen many times in various forms, each completely different from the next, but fantastic in their own right. And that is, of course, DC's iconic supervillain, the Joker. Created by Bill Finger, Bob Kane, and Jerry Robinson for DC Comics, Joker's character design was inspired by Conrad Veidt's portrayal of Gwynplaine in this 1928 film called The Man Who Laughs, which features a man whose mouth is disfigured into a permanent grin. And if you haven't heard of this film, I encourage you to look it up, listeners, because you'll immediately see how this inspired the original Joker as well as Todd Phillips' Joker, which we'll be talking about today. Another spoiler. And if you want to see something really scary, look up an image of this. It's honestly terrifying. It's so creepy. So they melded that concept with a sketch of a Joker playing card, and voila, DC's Joker was born right there.
I didn't know that.
I thought that was cool. Yeah, it's so. I was just always so curious, like where this concept. I thought it might have just been the Joker card, but I think it was brilliant, tapping into like the creepier side of some of those 1920s horror movies. Those are all really creepy. So I thought that was brilliant. And the Joker actually first appeared in the debut issue of the Batman comic, which was on April 25th, 1940. And I wanted to mention that because I think it's incredible that this character has had pretty much an 84-year-long relevance. You know, just last week, audiences were flocking to the theaters for the release of the long-anticipated sequel to Todd Phillips' Joker with Joker Folie, starring Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga. Nick, you were able to go and see this before we recorded, right?
I have seen it.
Yes. And that's it.
That's my review.
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of mixed reviews. I was talking about it with my brother because we were planning on seeing it. I'm home for the weekend right now. So we were planning on seeing it, and we're both a little nervous because it sounds like it's maybe not exactly living up to expectations, but in a way that almost still makes me excited to see it because I'm like, I just need to know. I need to know what everyone's talking about. I got to be part of this moment.
Yeah, see it with your own eyes, form your own opinion. I think the interesting thing, and we'll get into this later in the episode, Joker, the first Todd Phillips film, was such a polarizing film. People either really loved it or a lot of people really did not like it. And what's interesting about this sequel is it feels like both camps, the people who really liked it, felt really let down by it, and the people who didn't like Joker felt vindicated or justified.
That is so interesting.
So
they swapped them.
Yeah, but you know, but the reason we're doing this episode is because of this film's release. So I invite our listeners, don't listen to the noise. Check it out while it's on the big screen, and form your own opinion, because it may be totally for you. It's not for everybody.
That's what cinema is all about. It's subjective. Go and find your own experience. So that's what we love about it. But yeah, I think I want to say too, I think a massive part of Joker's relevance or his enduring appeal to audiences is that unlike many or even most supervillains, he doesn't have a completely definitive origin story. Over the years, whether in comic books, movies, TV shows, we've seen a variety of origin stories. Obviously, the most common one is him falling into a tank of chemical waste, resulting in his appearance. So you've got this incredibly fun and creepy villain who's got a warped sense of humor and psychopathic tendencies. And he's just made all the more fun by giving creators the freedom to kind of craft their own interpretations of why this diabolical clown, if you will, is the way he is. So yes, for the release of this new era Joker in Joker Folie, we thought it would be fun to do Gimme Three Jokers, starting with Jack Nicholson's Joker from Tim Burton's campy 1989 Batman. Then, of course, paying tribute to arguably the best Joker performance of all time by Heath Ledger in Christopher Nolan's 2008 film The Dark Knight. And finally, ending with Joaquin Phoenix's take on the character in Todd Phillips' 2019 Joker. Each one of these films, presents a completely different origin story for the character, different Joker, and each actor really brought their own unique interpretation of this iconic villain to life. So anything you want to add before we jump into our first film, Nick?
The only thing I'll add there's 2 shout outs I want to give.
Yes.
To 2 other great Joker performances that we will not have time to discuss today because it's not called the Gimme 5 podcast. It's called the Gimme 3 podcast. One is the OG, Cesar Romero, who was in the 1966 Adam West Batman movie and also the Batman series. He brings a lot of life and a really fun perspective on the character. And then Mark Hamill, who does the voice of Joker in one of my favorite Batman films, Mask of the Phantasm, an animated Batman film, which is so kick-ass. And then he also did the voice for Batman the Animated Series, which was in the 90s and is considered by many a Batman fan to be the quintessential Batman series. So, which was also heavily inspired by the 1989 Batman film, which we are going to discuss. So just wanted to shout out those 2 performances. Since we're talking about great Joker performances, I didn't want to leave those 2 folk out.
I love that. Great call.
But for now, we go into 1989, the year of our Lord, the year of Nick. That's the year I was born.
Hey!
Batman, directed by Tim Burton, starring Michael Keaton as Batman, Jack Nicholson as the Joker, and Kim Basinger as Vicky Vale. My goodness. Before I get into the plot summary, I think it's important to note just how much this film completely changed the game and really changed the industry as a whole. 1989 comic book films, they were not coming out every single week like they are today. And they certainly weren't dark and brooding and stylish like this film. You know, the Superman films had made some noise, but they were getting less and less good and making less and less money.
Right.
And Warner Brothers had the ideas that they wanted to jump back into, making a Batman film, but they were very gun shy for a long time. And there was one Batman film before this, as I mentioned, 1966 Adam West Batman. And at that point, Batman, it was just like a totally different character, a different persona. The tone was totally different. That's where you get all the pow, zap, kaboom. You know, it was like very 60s. Like if you watch the show is hilarious because they're like, let's speed up some bad guys, Robin. You betcha, Batman. And they'll go, pow, pow, pow. And then they're like, now let's boogie. And they fucking dance and do the whole hippie doing this. Like, what the fuck is happening? So anyways, this is not that Batman. I love that 1966 Batman movie, by the way. I wish we were talking about that.
I need to check that out.
It's a good, that might be a fun thing to watch with your family this week. That's a really fun
thing. Absolutely.
But the reason why Batman was so tame and, for lack of a better word, silly during the 50s, 60s was because comic books had to be. There was a thing called Comics Code of Authority that forced comic writers to make the material suitable for children. They didn't want the comics to have a negative effect on children, much like in the 90s. And they're like, oh, video games are corrupting the youth of today.
Right.
That's how they felt about the comics. So they're like, we need to make this, everything's got to be PG, you know? So decades later, the code was kaput and Batman comics and comics in general started getting more mature. The themes much darker, the characters more sinister, and you could look no further than perhaps the most well-known and intense graphic novels of the Batman franchise. Actually, I'm saying those words. I'm not a big comic book reader, but I know this comic book. I've read it, and it's very famous. It's called The Killing Joke. And it highlights a next level evil side of the Joker. The Joker is so bad in that movie. He does shit way worse than any of the movies we're going to talk about today. But with the success of that comic, Warner Brothers was finally ready to make a new Batman film and be open to a little bit more of a darker brand. And what filmmaker could blend this dark brand, this noir crime, and bring comic book aesthetics to it? Tim Burton. And arguably, nobody has been able to master that balance of like real world brooding noir and comic book essence better than he has, really.
Oh.
So I just thought that was interesting because a lot of people watch this now and they're like, man, this is campy or this is cartoony. When this came out, it was like, holy shit, this is dark. Like, oh my God, like this is the darkest comic book movie ever made at the time. So
that is so fascinating.
Yeah. So there's just a little bit of background before I get into Batman. And I mean, I'm not really going to talk too much about the plot because I mean, do we really need to go over the plot? Batman, he's the hero. Joker, he's the villain. He's got this focus of becoming a like homicidal artist, artful kills, a man who appreciates the sport. And Jack Nicholson is so fucking good. And then you got Vicky Vale, who's the love interest, who happens to be a photojournalist, and she falls in love with Bruce Wayne, but suspects there may be a little bit more to him than meets the eye. And she's right. I like that Vicky Vale's not an idiot in this movie, like like a lot of the other female characters in some of the Batman movies, where it's like, all right, she's not stupid. I think she knows who's Batman here.
She's actually really cool in this movie.
Yeah. And in this iteration of Batman, the Caped Crusader is not yet working in tandem with the Gotham police. He's still a mysterious vigilante. And the town, Gotham PD, they don't know if they can trust him. Again, a lot of Batman films follow this dynamic now, but this was the first time we saw this kind of dynamic happening on the big screen. So
it's so cool.
Bella, what were your thoughts on Batman and Jack Nicholson's performance as the Joker?
Yeah, this was actually my first time watching this movie. I had seen the second one with like Penguin and Catwoman as a kid, and it freaked me out. So I didn't really have any interest in watching the others at that time. But this movie was so much fun, and I love hearing about the history that you gave us, because when I watched it, I was like, wow, this is so campy, exactly like you said. But at the same time, I was like, Jesus, this is really dark. And I was thinking about so much of like, this is a movie so many people grew up on and watched as children, because it's like, it's Tim Burton. He's got kind of that dark, whimsical style, which is why he was so perfect for telling this story. Because I think, the characters, the costumes, the setting, it's all very eccentric and sometimes even comical. But then there's a really sadistic plot line, especially with Joker's character. So it's like this perfect balance of horror and camp with fantastical world building, which obviously we all know is Tim Burton's specialty. And I think he was just such a brilliant choice for this too, because, and Batman fans, don't kill me, but I think Batman is a little bit cheesy, but it's like equally cheesy as it is dark. So that's why I think this works so well.
Yeah. It recognizes the cheese and doesn't try to ignore it. And then it also recognizes some of the sinister elements of the story and the real, like the connections to real world situations. And it blends those really perfectly.
Yeah, it's genius. I love it. It's so much fun. And Jack Nicholson as the Joker was perfect casting. Like, come on. He's got the creepy voice. I loved his Joker laugh. I loved how it would kind of transition from like a hee 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 to like ha ha ha, like all the way through very fluidly. He executed that perfectly. One thing I loved about his character too is, and I haven't read the comics, so DC comic fans, if you're listening, feel free to call me out and correct me if I'm wrong. But based on what I have read about the comics, it seems to me that this version of Joker is kind of the closest to like you were saying, the Joker in the comics. Like he's not super scary, but he's also not just a little prankster, because I know that there were like in the comics they would go back and forth on him just being like a prankster versus like an actually malicious villain. Right. And obviously we definitely do see an extremely violent and kind of malicious side to his character in this. So I think he's kind of, the best way to describe him in this is like a sadistic prankster, because he kind of combines the two. He has a lot of clownish jokes and gags, but they're all executed in a super creepy or violent way. For example, the flower pinned to his jacket shoots acid instead of water, which is like what you would expect from a clown act. Or I love that scene when Batman socks him in the face and he like spits out a teeth chattering toy covered in blood. It's just such a creepy gag, and Nicholson nailed them every single time. He was so good in this. Also, we all know that Nicholson can do crazy things with his face. Like he can make his eyes bug out of his head, or I love when his eyebrows are like dancing all over his forehead. And we've seen that in some of his more unhinged roles like The Shining or The Witches of Eastwick, which we've talked about on this show.
Yeah.
But I really loved seeing him in such a physically demanding role. Like he's dancing in this, or he's even miming. The miming bit was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Like seeing Jack Nicholson miming. I don't know why. It made me laugh out loud. I thought it was so funny. And his dance moves, you know, when he enters the art museum dancing to Party Man.
Yeah.
He really went for it. He gave it 100%. And I think it really paid off in this film.
He does a great job of, here's another pro wrestling reference. You know,
yes.
what was the term I introduced to our listeners a few weeks ago? Maximize your minutes, boy. Here's another one, and that is when a heel is really good at doing what a heel should do, which is like take that beating when they need to take that beating, you know, and do it in a way that's just so cathartic for the audience, where it's like, get that son of a bitch, and they're like, oh, they're selling, you know, so hard, and they call that showing ass. Love it. Jack Nicholson shows ass in this movie so wonderfully. He just like that scene you talk about where Batman's kicking his ass and he's got the teeth chattering thing coming out and he takes these more bumps. It's just like, God damn, I love it. Absolutely love it.
Yes.
So yes, I've always loved this movie. It was a staple of my childhood, as you mentioned.
Love it.
And I think I appreciate it even more now as an adult and as a filmmaker, because I mean, this movie is just oozing with style. You've got this, like the chiaroscuro lighting. Like it looks like a comic. It looks like straight off of the page of a comic book.
Yeah. The lighting is crazy in this movie.
Yeah. It's like, it's filmed and shot like a film noir movie. And then they've got that Art Deco production design, you know, which is, again, that inspired kind of Batman the Animated Series, this whole production design of this. I love the look of the Batman suit in this. It's so simple. This was also the first time that Batman suit, speaking of, you know, before this, it was all just, you know, like if you look at the Adam West Batman, it's just basically tights. I
was going to say it's like softer material, almost kind of like felt like, right?
Now everybody thinks of Batman and they think of this like hard rubber or hard protective like suit. This was the first movie that was like, no, he should have this because this is like more menacing. So they introduced
that's
that.
Sick. Oh, that's so cool.
And then Jack Nicholson's makeup, man, it's just so freaky. It's so cool.
So freaky. I love how they would have him put on a tanner skin tone.
Yeah, like a skin tone over his white face.
Yeah, at first I didn't really understand because I didn't know that much about the character before I watched it. And I was like, at first I thought that he just had white on his handkerchief when he wipes his face.
Right.
I was like, what is the point of this? And then I was like, oh, duh. His skin has been bleached, Bella. Like, get your head in the game. But that was brilliant. And even like with the skin tone, because the way they did it is so brilliant because they like cake it on so much.
Yeah.
And like he's just trying so hard to disguise himself, and loved it so much.
I remember as a kid watching this, being really scared in that scene when Vicky Vale like throws the water in his face and he goes like, oh God, I'm melting. And he turns around and his face is like half skin tone, half white. And he goes, boom. Oh man. For a 5-year-old, that was a horrifying experience.
Yeah, that is terrifying. Honestly, watching this, I was like, yeah, I don't know. It's funny because I did think of this movie as kind of for kids, but watching it as an adult, I was like, no, this is really disturbing.
Yeah. I mean, it was for kids in 1989 because kids were just fucking tougher back then. But
there you go. Yeah. Could handle that kind of shit.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
So there's also these beautiful, wild artistic choices that Tim Burton makes that we don't really see in comic book movies today. And here's just here's one example. So Joker, he's killed his boss, Grissom. And then he shows up who's played by Jack Palance, by the way. Awesome. Then he shows up to this meeting with a bunch of mob bosses, essentially telling them, hey, I'm running the show now. And one of the guys gives him some shit. And Jack goes, hey, if you don't want to work together, we'll go our separate ways. It's fine. And they shake hands. But Joker's got some buzzer or something on his hand that fries this guy to death. And the shot that I love is the mob guy falls into the chair. He's totally charred. He looks like something out of Tales from the Crypt.
Yeah.
There's smoke all around him. And Tim Burton does this snap zoom out. And it's like the combination of the imagery of like a dead guy falling into a chair, totally charred, and the camera move. It's just like something out of a horror film. And you're just like, whoa, man, I dig this moment. This is because the kind of stuff is like Superman was not doing shit like this. And we really, to be frank, don't see anything like this in modern comic book movies either. They were just there was a little bit of fearlessness to this whole situation.
For sure. Oh my God, 100%. Everything is just so extravagant in this movie. Like from the sets to the stunts, the pyrotech, like the fire and the explosions. It's just so over the top. And I think that's what makes it so special too. Yeah. Everything is.
Getting Jack Nicholson to do this movie was a really big deal because now once they were able to book him for this movie, it ceased becoming a comic book movie, which they didn't really want it to be. It was once you had Jack Nicholson, it was a film. This was cinema because nowadays every A-list actor and their mama does a comic book movie. It's not even a thing. That was not the case at the time. So getting arguably one of the greatest actors of all time to commit to this role, it was a transitional moment for the genre. And of course, that's going to come at a cost, Bella. Listen to this. Listen to this shit.
God.
Originally, he was going to get $10 million for the role. That's 1980. Wow. That's a 1989 $10 million, not a 2024 $10 million.
Insane.
But Jack Nicholson, brilliant man that he is, he was like, oh, okay, I'll lower my price to $6 million. But he wanted to take a cut of the merchandise, the merchandise take. And I think he ended up making like $90 million or something on this film when it was all said and done because of the merchandise deal.
Genius. Yeah. Absolute genius.
It should also be mentioned that Michael Keaton, Batman fans were so pissed when they cast Michael Keaton as Batman because before this, Keaton was like a comedy guy. He was in movies like Mr. Mom and Night Shift and She's Having a Baby. So when they cast him, everybody's like, oh, it's going to be silly Adam West shit again. And they were wrong. And to this day, I think Michael Keaton is my personal favorite Batman. I like his interpretation. He is a person, he is a kind of a goober, and Bruce Wayne would be a goober. I like Robert Pattinson's, Bruce Wayne also. I really like what he did with the character. Great. But this guy, he's like kind of a goober. He's kind of silly. He's kind of awkward. He's not really, Michael Keaton, if you're listening, I love you. I think you're sexy. But if you put him up against, say, like the Val Kilmers or the George Clooney's or the Afflecks, maybe not the best looking Batman. But I think that all works as having to put on this suit and become somebody else.
Yeah. I think you're so right. He's definitely the most human out of all of them, now that I'm thinking about it. Like, I am a Christian Bale girly. I love him. He's my Batman. But now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, he's not very realistic compared to this one.
He's just boring as shit. He doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
He just moves through plots.
It's true. It's true. I don't really have any real argument or support for why I'm a Christian Bale.
Well, if it was the Batman you grew up with, you know.
That's probably it, honestly.
Keaton was the Batman I grew up with. You know?
Yeah, that'll do it. Yeah,
some 10-year-old now is, you know, Pattinson's going to be his end all.
Oh,
be all,
for sure.
Know? So that's funny. Any final thoughts on the 1989 installment of Batman?
Oh, this movie is so awesome. One thing I just wanted to mention that I thought was so fun. I love that scene that you were talking about, I think, where Joker shows up at Grissom's house for the first time. That scene is just, it's so good. And the score is so good. And they do this thing where it's like the sound of like a rattlesnake in the score. And I loved that detail so much because I was like, oh, that's just, something about that is just so fun to think about with like a villain.
That you, Sugar Bumps? Who the hell are you?
It's me, Sugar Bumps.
Oh, thank God you're alive. I heard you'd been
fried. Is that what you heard? You set me up over a woman. A woman! You must be insane. Don't bother.
Your life won't be worth spit!
I've been dead once already. It's very liberating. You should think of it as therapy.
Jack, listen. Maybe we can cut a deal.
Jack is dead, my friend. You can call me Joker. And as you can see, I'm a lot happier.
There's this one shot at the end of that scene after he's blasted Grissom to hell, and he sits at his desk, and the lighting is so fucking scary, and the camera like moves in close on his face, and he goes, "Wait till they get a load of me." It's just like, God damn, it looks so cool, man. Fucking A.
It's so cool. And he's so funny too. Like,
he's
this
really
town
funny.
needs an enema.
Yeah.
I thought that was so funny. Oh, so good.
Yeah, there's so
Honestly,
many great
fantastic.
So many great one-liners that Nicholson has in this performance.
Mm-hmm. I love it. Definitely a must-watch, I have to say.
Mm-hmm. And you know what? Now, I mean, here's the thing. After I finished watching Batman, I was like, I don't really want to watch a Dark Knight. I kind of want to watch Batman Returns. Right now. You should rewatch Batman Returns because I think you'll really enjoy it. You know, now, especially being like a fan of the spooky. It's probably you know the closest Batman film gets to being a horror film because I mean, just look at the Penguin and
the Penguin like fucked me up. Like the way you were talking about that scene of Joker turning around and saying boo, that the Penguin for me, like just the sight of him, I was like, oh yeah, Lord.
So yeah, that's freaky. And then you have Michelle Pfeiffer in that fucking suit. I mean,
amazing.
Jesus cry, bro.
Yeah.
Jesus
Talk
cry.
about Halloween costume inspo.
Fucking A.
Yeah.
I don't think
Definitely need to
I
revisit
think I need
that.
to hit the gym a few more times before I check that one.
Yeah, it might be the most uncomfortable Halloween costume as well. That suit seems impossible to get into.
Yeah. Well, Batman by Tim Burton. It is available to stream on Max, HBO Max, whatever you want to call it. It is also available at your local video stores, so I believe you should check it out. Yes. Give your local video stores some love. I'm sure they got the DVD. You get all the cool special features and whatnot. Fun stuff. Great to revisit that film. I hadn't seen it in far too long.
An excellent Joker to start off with.
Excellent Joker.
Starting off strong.
Oh, yeah.
So. Up next, we've got a film with a seriously loyal fan base. I think it's safe to say this film is widely regarded as a masterpiece by many cinephiles. It's often hailed as one of the best superhero movies ever made. In fact, it's the highest rated superhero movie on Letterboxd, which I thought was pretty crazy, with an impressive 4.5 star rating. So I'm sure you guys have already guessed it. It is, of course, Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight. This film features an unforgettable all-star cast with Christian Bale as Bruce Wayne, our Batman, Michael Caine as Alfred, Gary Oldman as Lieutenant Gordon, Morgan Freeman as Lucius Fox, Aaron Eckhart as Harvey Dent, Maggie Gyllenhaal as Rachel Dawes, and of course, the incredible Heath Ledger as the Joker. So, picking up after the events of Batman Begins, in The Dark Knight, Batman is facing an increasingly intense fight against Gotham's criminal underworld. But this time he's joined forces with Lieutenant Jim Gordon and District Attorney Harvey Dent in hopes of dismantling the remaining crime organizations that are plaguing the streets of Gotham. And just as things are beginning to improve, a new and unpredictable threat emerges with a criminal mastermind known as the Joker, as he unleashes a wave of chaos, leaving the city's citizens paralyzed with fear. So, for some fun background on this film and Joker's character, apparently Christopher Nolan hadn't planned on directing a sequel, but he had discussed just some ideas with his co-writer David Goyer while they were filming Batman Begins. So as soon as The Dark Knight was greenlit, they were kind of ready to go in developing the basic core plot points of the story that they wanted to tell. And then Jonathan Nolan, Christopher's brother, actually helped shape the story even further. He even wrote the first draft of the screenplay because Christopher was off finishing The Prestige for a good portion of that time. And so once that project wrapped, then the brothers came together, co-wrote the final script, and worked on that all the way through pre-production, which I thought was pretty crazy.
That's pretty normal.
Oh, okay. I was like, that seems so last minute, but I guess for like a big movie like this, but maybe that's just how it goes these days. Even just at a glance, it's clear that The Dark Knight is a very different film from Tim Burton's Batman. First of all, it strays from the original comic books a little bit with its own kind of unique plot. And it revolutionized it's another revolution of a whole new wave of superhero movies similar to Batman, but in a completely different way by really grounding the story in this gritty realism that kind of made it feel more like a crime or a political thriller even than just the traditional superhero film we had up until this point. And we also get to see a completely unique version of the Joker, dramatically different from Jack Nicholson's portrayal, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. When writing the script, Nolan and Goyer wanted their Joker to be genuinely terrifying and a little bit more, actually much more mysterious than Nicholson's, which led them to make the brilliant decision of leaving his backstory kind of completely ambiguous, which is something I talked about earlier with Joker's character. And I think this was such a brilliant idea because I think sometimes the mystery behind a villain makes them that much scarier.
Yes.
While researching for this episode, I was actually really shocked to learn about the extreme backlash against Heath Ledger's casting at the time. I guess a lot of people thought it was a big mistake and that he would just never live up to Nicholson's performance. And, such a daunting and aggressive public reaction definitely put Ledger to the test. But damn, did he prove them wrong. He completely exceeded everyone's expectations and delivered one of the most iconic performances in film history. He completely disappeared into the Joker. Heath Ledger was no longer before our eyes in this truly bone-chilling performance, which actually earned him a posthumous Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, which, might I add, also made The Dark Knight the first comic book adaptation to win an Oscar. So Ledger turned...
Actually, Batman did win an Academy Award. The 1989.
Wait, what?
Yeah, it won an Academy Award for art direction.
Oh, hell yeah. Okay, I don't know why that... I was misinformed. So thank you for informing me. And honestly, that's rude that art direction was not considered.
Yeah, fuck you, Google.
Yeah, that's so messed up. So thank you for that. So Ledger turned this initial doubt into overwhelming praise with a truly legendary performance. I love this film, but I've been rambling a lot, so I'm going to turn it over to you. Nick, what are your thoughts on The Dark Knight, and what do you think of Heath Ledger's Joker?
I mean, this is one of those movies where I will never forget watching it for the first time. I saw it with a bunch of my friends, midnight screening, and our jaws just on the floor. And
yeah,
I mean, this is a pretty damn good movie, by far the best in Nolan's trilogy, like by a mile. Like, it's actually the only one that I will go back and like rewatch frequently. Like, the other two, I mean, the one after this, real stinky. But it's got a lot of interesting things to say, this one. And but Ledger just steals the film. He's so hypnotic. He is the epitome of what it means to be the Joker, because in nearly every iteration of the Joker, I'm saying nearly every iteration because we're going to talk about another movie later where this doesn't happen, but in nearly every iteration of the Joker, all the good iterations, it is a character that you love to hate and you hate that you love him. Yeah. And this Ledger's Joker is that in spades, boy. This is that first scene, that introductory scene where he's coming in and robbing the banks with a bunch of stooges. And he hardly says a goddamn word, but the actions and the way he's set this whole thing up, you learn so much about the character. There's so much development about how he operates and how much of a lone wolf he is and how smart he is.
Yeah.
Every element of how threatening this character is on display in that first scene. And he's got a total of like 2 fucking lines. And when he pulls off that mask the first time, it's just like, oh my God. It's just, you're in. You're immediately
so awesome.
You're immediately in, and it just looks cool. And he's got this fucking aura that's so magnetic. I mean, it's just one of... sometimes I forget about it, or I admittedly and mistakenly and incorrectly will dismiss this performance as like, I think it's one of the great performances of all time, because it's just so memorable. And so, like, whenever it's on and one of his scenes comes in, it's just like, I have to watch the rest of the movie because he's sucked you in so much. It's
100%.
It's just unbelievable. It transcends comic book movies, and it goes in the category of just great performances ever, I think.
This is an example of an actor who knows exactly what needs to be done and exactly what the director envisions, but then also is so unbelievably talented that he still makes it his own. And like adds all these flares that you can just tell, like, he did that. And that's what I love so much about this character. Like, I and this performance, I love what he did with Joker's voice. There's still the kind of erratic fluctuation that we associate with the character and that we kind of hear in Nicholson's performance as well.
Yeah.
And I read that Ledger was inspired by ventriloquists, who I guess can do this thing where they mix a high pitch with a low pitch. And when I read this, I was like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. The more I think about it, the more I hear that in his performance. And I just thought that was so impressive. And so that sounds really difficult to do.
Yeah, it does.
And then he adds the like tongue flicks and clicks. I don't know what word to use. And this might be too niche, but it's really similar to a tick that David Tennant does as Barty Crouch Jr. in the 4th Harry Potter, which actually came out before this film. Just saying.
Interesting.
But it's such a small and yet striking aspect of these two villains that you can't help noticing it. And it's just so freaky. And I love it. It's one of my favorite parts of like the physical performance of this, which is incredible. You know, similar to Nicholson, he's completely erratic, completely unpredictable. And I love how animated he is in this. Like the way he uses his hands, it always seems like he's racing against time. He has this increasingly frenetic energy. And I think this also gives the effect of him kind of seeming uncomfortable in his own body, which I think just adds to the character's madness even more.
It's interesting hearing you say that thing about the voice, because on this rewatch, I was just like, man, I love that, you know, like he's got this kind of, you know,
that was really good.
nasally thing, you know, going on. But then there's moments where he like goes really deep and it's like super scary. You're just like, holy fuck.
So scary.
It's just like, he's like putting on this Joker thing, but like, that's the real him is when he's like growling. It's just like, it's like a fucking, he's got the range of a metal singer. It's incredible. And I love the sloppy makeup design, you know?
Oh,
so
that's my
cool.
favorite
Yeah,
part.
so
I can't lie. His character design is, out of all the Jokers we're talking about, and even just every Joker out there that I've seen, this is my favorite.
I agree.
His costuming, like, hats off to the costume designer, Lindy Hemming. I love the pattern of his shirt under his suit and like the vibrant colors. And I love that it's still like a tribute to the original Joker look, if you will. But then having that makeup, because, you know, we don't have the original backstory of him falling into a vat of chemical waste. So there had to be, it was kind of, you know, this Joker's physical design is presented as makeup, which I think is maybe even more disturbing because it tells us that he did this to himself and he hasn't taken it off since, because it's got cracks and like it's smeared, and the black around his eyes makes his eyes bulge out even more. Yeah. And then of course we have the iconic smile, you know, the decision to make his smile gruesome scars rather than just like drawn on is just, it's horrifying, but it's so clever at the same time because, you know, it just makes his background or his origin story even more intriguing and unclear because, you know, you question whether someone else did this to him or he did it to himself or how this came to be. And I love that we don't ever get like a real answer.
And he is also funny in this. You know,
oh my God, he's hilarious.
Just like Nicholson in Batman, he's got some fucking zingers in this one. Let's not blow this out of proportion. You know, it's just like, and then like, oh my God, this is also one of those scenes where I remember seeing it in the theater, like that scene where he first comes up to all those gangsters and he makes the pencil disappear.
Yes.
I remember the fucking pop that got in the theater. And we were like, that was the moment where we were like, holy shit, we're in for something totally different here with this fucking
crazy
Joker. Yeah, you're just like, oh.
Even his laugh in that scene, he does like, he's like, ah, oh, ee, ah,
yeah.
But like he starts just making weird noises and you're like, oh, this dude is unhinged, man. Oh, it's so good.
There's one moment that I really honed in on this rewatch where I was just like, fuck, this character's fucked up. Yeah. And it's when he's like in the holding room and one of the cops is watching him. Mm-hmm. And he's talking about why he chooses to use a knife rather than a gun to kill people.
Do you want to know why I use a knife? Guns are too quick. You can't savor all the little emotions. You see, in their last moments, people show you who they really are. So, in a way, I knew your friends better than you ever did. Would you like to know which of them were cowards?
Fuck, that is so fucking evil and twisted. It's just, it just makes your...
It gives me chills.
Yeah, it really does, because it feels real.
It sounds true.
Yeah,
I believe
it does. Yeah, totally.
And that's what's so scary.
So yeah, just incredible. And then there's some of the absolute incredible work that the stunt team does, like that the car chase with the big rig. I mean, just out of this world. The climax in the multi-story abandoned building. I mean, some really amazing action sequences. Perhaps some of the best action sequences of any Batman film ever are in this movie.
Yeah. I mean, thank God Christopher Nolan insisted on practical stunts and wanted to avoid CGI at all costs, because it really pays off. Like, watching this, I've seen this movie a handful of times by now, but watching it for this episode, I was like, how did they film this? Because I've been watching X-Men lately, which is a whole bunch of CGI. I love those movies, but very much CGI. And this was one where this superhero movie, I was like, holy shit, this looks so real. And then I was like, wait, it kind of is.
And it is. And that's why.
Yeah, which is amazing.
That's why it holds up. That's why those action sequences hold up, and that's why it's going to hold up. That and Burton's Batman, I think that's why they're going to hold up more than, say the Affleck Batmans, which have so much CGI.
Yeah.
It's just like at a certain point, the CGI just gets dated. And that it
doesn't work.
The one thing with this movie that does look a little dated is the Aaron Eckhart Two-Face deal, where it's just like,
oh yeah,
it doesn't look the best.
That part was kind of funny.
Yeah,
I mean, that whole character is just, I can't handle every single time it makes me laugh when Joker walks in as dressed as the nurse, and he doesn't recognize him with the mask. And he's like, oh, he starts shaking.
Takes off the mask. You're like, oh, that's you son of a bitch.
I'm like, dude, come on. It's so funny every single time.
What kind of whore ass nurses are in Gotham City with that kind of makeup to where you didn't realize?
The makeup, the hair, really the mask conceals all of that to you. It kills me every single time I watch it. It's the funniest thing.
Yeah, it is.
But
it is.
But everything else holds up. I really agree. I think this is a timeless movie, to be honest. And then this performance is just unreal. Like you said,
I think the performance is more timeless than the movie. But
it's what keeps you coming back to it, for sure.
Yeah, it is. I definitely got sucked in again. I was like, once Heath goes away, I'll probably just shut the movie off. But I finished it. I was in.
Yeah, I know. Jonathan, my boyfriend, has seen it so many times, and I was like, "Are you going to watch it with me?" And he was like, "No." And then he watched the entire thing. I was like, see, it's just too good. You can't walk away.
Yeah.
Once you get locked in.
It is too good. It's too good.
Too
Any final thoughts on The Dark Knight, Bella?
I love Heath Ledger and this performance so much. And I love just the way that this Joker was written. Out of all three we're talking about today, this is my favorite in terms of Joker as the original character, if that makes any sense. I just love the fact that he doesn't have a backstory. We're not given, and if anything, we're given different backstories, which only makes you distrust him even more, which I love. He's completely just evil, complete evil incarnate, and I just think he's one of the greatest villains of all time in this. So
he's evil, and he's got a very specific worldview. He's got as twisted as they are, he stands for something,
Yep.
And there are elements where he's talking where you're like, he's not wrong. And that's what makes him a great villain, is when you have a villain that has some merit to their stance. And you're just like, he is, and this is the problem I have with the third film that we're going to discuss. He is the perfect antithesis. Let me say that again. He is the perfect antithesis to Batman.
Yes.
They are, and he says it so beautifully in that final speech he gives when he's hanging upside down, and he says, we're destined to do this forever because you can't kill me because you stand for something, and I can't kill you because you're too much fun.
I love that line. It's so good.
And here's actually a fun little tidbit. In Batman, 1989 Batman, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, Joker dies. You know, he falls off of a hella tall building and he perishes. Warner Brothers, after the fact, were like, fuck, we killed him. He was so good. He was so popular. We wish we could have brought him back for the sequel. Like, why the fuck did we kill him? So funny. In this movie, they're like, let's not kill him. And then tragically, Heath Ledger passes away, so they can't bring him back for the third one.
Oh, yeah. Oh my God, that's crazy to think about.
The Dark Knight, also available on HBO Max, also available at your local video stores, and frequently pops up at repertory theaters all around the Los Angeles area, and I'm sure other cities near you. So check it out on it's a banger on the big screen, baby. Wowee zowie.
I would love to experience that one day.
You shall. They play it at the Bev frequently.
Yes.
All right, my friends, we are going to take a quick break. And during that break, you are going to hear from Gimme Three producer, LADFF Film Festival director, and my wife, Sonja Mereu, for a segment that we call Sonja's Movie Minute. Stick around for all that and much more here on the Gimme Three podcast.
Hello, I'm Sonja, and this is my Movie Minute. I went to see the new Joker movie on opening night. I didn't expect to love it since I wasn't really into the first one, but I can say that I was disappointed, even considering my low expectations. Since I only have a minute, I won't go into my review of the film. Plus, there are tons of lively reviews available all over the internet. What the film did make me wonder is why this iteration of Joker doesn't work at all for me. Whereas previous portrayals like Jack Nicholson's, Heath Ledger's, and Cesar Romero on the Batman TV show are also cherished in my heart. The conclusion I came to is that these previous Jokers all existed as disruptors to society. And whether or not you agree with them, they have a point of view and a goal. Plus, they were all pretty damn funny. In these recent Joker films, I do think that Joaquin Phoenix is mesmerizing in the role, and he carries these two otherwise bogged-down movies on his emaciated shoulders. But I think the issue is that this Joker doesn't have a point of view or a purpose. Arthur Fleck is just a victim. And when he becomes Joker, he's suddenly charismatic. He can dance and sing. Men want to be him, and he gets the girl. But he doesn't actually do anything to change the cycle of victimization and abuse in society. He has no ideas. And as both films drive home real hard, he definitely isn't funny. So where does that leave us? Sadly, it leaves me feeling like these movies were missed opportunities.
All right, welcome back to the Gimme Three podcast, everybody. A series for cinephiles. And Jokers are wild, baby. We are talking Jokers, all things Joker, in celebration of the release of Joker Folie, Deux. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, I think so. That sounds great to me.
Sure. Folie, Deux, Joker, Part 2. That is in theaters right now. Check it out. Directed by Todd Phillips. And we figured we'd mark the occasion by discussing some of the great Joker performances ever. We discussed Jack Nicholson in Tim Burton's 1989 Batman. And we discussed, of course, the Academy Award winning performance from Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight. And now we are going to bring it home with another Academy Award-winning performance, Joker from 2019, directed by Todd Phillips, starring Joaquin Phoenix, Robert De Niro, and Zazie Beetz. And here we go. We've got Joaquin Phoenix, who plays Arthur Fleck. And Arthur Fleck works as a clown in Gotham City. And in the first act, we see this cat getting bullied. You know, a bunch of punk kids. They steal his sign. They beat the crap out of him. And the filmmakers are really driving home that this cat is, mentally unstable. He's got some mental health issues. He's seeing a social worker to kind of talk through some of these mental issues. And they mention in these scenes that he used to be in a hospital for some of these mental issues. He's taken medication. He's also got something called PBA, also known as emotional incontinence. This is a neurological disorder that causes uncontrollable and inappropriate episodes of crying or laughing. But in the case of this film, it's always laughing. So Arthur lives with his mother, Penny, who's played by Frances Conroy. I love her. And love her. Every night they watch their favorite late night show, which is basically The Tonight Show. And it stars this guy, Murray Franklin, who's played by Robert De Niro. So as the plot trucks along, and the plot is pretty thin, almost as thin as Joaquin got for this film. Yeah. More bad stuff happens to Arthur Fleck's character, including getting fired. And he ends up getting bullied again on a subway by a bunch of Wall Street guys. So he kills them. He kills these three men. And the murder of these three men sparks this movement of a bunch of angry, troubled people who also start dressing like clowns. And they start inciting chaos and violence in Gotham City. And things just start getting more and more tense. And as things get more and more tense, Arthur starts to become more and more unstable and eventually fully adopts this twisted persona as the Joker. Bella, your thoughts on Joker?
I have a bit of a story of like the first time I watched this that I think is kind of funny.
Please.
So saw this movie when I was 19. And I vividly remember going to the theater with a huge group of friends. We were all so excited and we all loved it. Like this was one of my favorite movies for a weekend. Come Monday at school in my film class, my professor was like, today we're watching Martin Scorsese's The King of Comedy. And she was like, I'm sure a lot of you have gone to see Joker over the weekend. And I guess this is kind of a spoiler if you haven't seen Joker or King of Comedy. So just be warned, listeners. But she was like, this is basically the movie that created Joker. And I was like, what? And so, of course, we watched it that day. And it blew my mind. I was like, holy shit, this movie is so good. And I just couldn't believe how much of it was in Joker. And that kind of broke my heart. I thought I had seen something just like extremely unique and original. And I was like, wow, what a cool origin story to give Joker. Like, how does someone even begin to think of that? And that's when I kind of realized Todd Phillips' obsession with Martin Scorsese's work and how much of that movie and Taxi Driver are in Joker.
Right.
And, listen, I'm all for cinematic tributes. I'm not saying that every movie has to be completely original. Like, I don't believe that. And I still really
most aren't.
enjoyed.
Most
aren't. And I still really enjoyed Joker. But just seeing how much of Scorsese's work made up that film definitely kind of changed the way I looked at it before.
Yeah.
Anyways, cut to today. I hadn't revisited this movie probably since it came out. So rewatching it for this episode just felt like a whole new experience, especially because we're watching it through a specific lens this week of Joker and comparing it to the other Jokers and who is this character Joker and what does he mean and all that kind of stuff, which definitely impacted how I felt towards the film watching it this week.
Yeah.
So, I had to kind of just remind myself that this movie is really different from Batman and The Dark Knight because it's just the Joker. Like it's completely separate from the comic books, except for when it chooses to connect to the lore randomly, which is something that we'll talk about, I guess. But I don't know. As of now, I used to love this movie, but watching it today, I'm leaning towards feeling that this movie is just not that good as a whole. I think the writing isn't great, and it just felt really messy at times, or just kind of aimless. Like, I think Phillips got really lost in the middle of it. I personally really like the beginning and the ending of this film. But the middle just really lost me this time, and I can get more into that later. But to keep it short for me, Joaquin Phoenix carried this entire film on his back, along with Hildur Guðnadóttir's haunting and remarkable score, which is one of my favorite scores of all time.
The score is cool. The score is really cool.
So cool. And just honest, it also carries the film. Like, it just carries that mood and the energy of like everything that's going on internally for him. And I also really like the cinematography and coloring in this film, I have to say. I think it's really fun to look at. So there's a good mix of things that do really work for me, and then things that also really don't.
Yeah.
I think having watched these other Joker films, the biggest thing for me was reminding me that this movie is a Joker origin story rather than like just another Joker movie, because we only really get to see the Joker in the last half hour of the film. Before that, we're watching Arthur Fleck, who's a completely different character existing outside of the original comics and, you know, everything we know about DC's Joker. But I think I just have an issue with this origin story specific, like in general, especially in the context of the original Joker and what he stands for or what he represents in the comics and these other movies. You know, in the last two films, I feel like Joker is really the wild card. Like, he's unpredictable, and most importantly, he's unredeemable. He's really just motivated by the pleasure he gets from instigating chaos or violence and anarchy. But in this movie, Joker is taken to like, it's a completely different approach, because they've given us this really tragic and deeply depressing origin story that makes you feel so bad for him. And, you know, his iconic laugh, like you said in the synopsis, is a medical condition resulting from abuse he suffered as a child, which is just so horrible. And I just don't know if that really worked for me anymore after watching these other Joker films and understanding this character so much, because for me, the Joker is scary and cool because there's nothing that really justifies his actions, if that makes sense.
Or if you think that there's stuff there's a reason why he is this way. But as you said earlier, the mystery of it is what makes it frightening. And there's there's this rule in horror films also. It's like the less you see of the monster, the scarier it is. And despite this being a movie about the Joker, it's called Joker. In my opinion, Joker feels the most flat and uninteresting in this movie compared to most other iterations of the Joker I've seen.
Which is shocking. And in this film, it's really confusing to me, because I feel like it kind of tries to justify his actions. And maybe I'm wrong. I still am not totally sure how I feel about this, but I kind of felt like it was trying to justify his actions by giving him a mental illness and a traumatic childhood, but then also is trying to present this like eat the rich or fuck the system narrative, because he becomes this accidental symbol of anarchy after those 3 murders, which ultimately makes him an anti-hero. And I completely understand that, like, in order for Joker to be the film's main character, he's now framed as an anti-hero rather than the villain. But I just don't know if it worked in this film. I think there might have been a different version, like a version of the story that could have worked better. And I'm just not convinced that the mental illness angle was the right direction for that, if that makes sense.
I have a lot of issues with this film. The depiction of people with mental illness it's very flat. It's very one note. More importantly, as you touched on, the film's theme, its message and I'm only talking about the theme and the message because it hits you over the fucking head with it,
yeah.
is that, you know, be nice to people with mental illness or they may kill you.
Yeah, which I was like,
you know, fear of being killed should not be a reason to be nice to people. That is not a revelatory, you know, thesis. That is a lazy thesis.
Yeah.
And yeah, it also appears to me that the filmmaker, Todd Phillips is his name. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's taking this stance, as you mentioned, he's presenting Arthur Fleck as a victim in this film.
Yes.
And we see Fleck murder 6 people in the 2-hour runtime of this film. And they spend a lot of time talking about building the trauma that Fleck had in his past. And it's horrible stuff. There's no doubt about that. And
it's like, horrible.
It's really, as you said, it's tragic stuff.
It kind of just makes you feel shitty the whole time.
Mm-hmm. They seem to use that not as a reason, but as an excuse for why he becomes a serial killer. And I'm all for an anti-hero film. Some of my favorite films are anti-hero films, but this is not an anti-hero film. This is a hero film. Only our hero is a serial killer. That's my problem with it. And the issue that I have with this film is, in most of the other iterations of Joker, there is an other side where you can see 2 sides of the coin. You can see, okay, this is Joker's worldview. This is where Joker's coming from. What's the other side coming from? And there's an interesting dynamic of how they feel, you know, their interpretation of what good and evil is and what society is. There's no other side of the coin in this film. It's just this Joker perspective, which he doesn't even really have a perspective. Like, it's really like these other people that have a perspective, you know? He killed those guys because they were murdering him, not because they were stock people.
Yep.
So, as you mentioned, you know, people, when this came out, they were like, oh, it's just Taxi Driver. This is as good as Taxi Driver. And it's like, I think a lot of people haven't seen Taxi Driver or hadn't seen it in a long time, because with Taxi Driver, which is, you know, an anti-hero-ish film. Yeah. You have that main character, who's also called Arthur, by the way, who also, much like Arthur Fleck, has a very shallow, a very narrow, a very immature worldview, much like Arthur Fleck. But in Taxi Driver, they do a much better job of showing how hypocritical his worldview is. They do, more importantly, they do a better job of exploring the worlds that Arthur is critical of in Taxi Driver. You know, he's critical of like the scum that's like permeating through the city, but yet he frequents, you know, porno theaters, and and we get to
he is that,
and then we also get to spend time with a prostitute and a pimp. So he's critical of these people, but we get to know who these people are, actually. And then he's critical of politicians that are running the city, but we get to meet people who are running for political office, and we get to understand what their psyche is. So it has commentary on all these things, but we get to see their side of the coin. There's a discussion to be had. There's no discussion to be had here. Taxi Drivers does a much better job of world building because it is a 3-dimensional film. It is a 3-dimensional character. This is very 2-dimensional. And you know, Taxi Driver does a much better job of like, and I'm only mentioning Taxi Driver because it was like that, and as you mentioned, The King of Comedy were like the 2 bases for the comparisons, and they were saying this was the modern Taxi Driver. They do a much better job in Taxi Driver of building tension. And in that tension building, the audience knows this dude is bad news. In this film, Phillips is like, the tension is building. And then he's like, hey, look at this guy coming down the stairs in slow motion. Ain't he cool? Isn't this cool, guys? No, it's not. I'm sorry, it's not. So I can see why people made a lot of comparisons to Taxi Driver, because there's a lot of stuff borrowed from Taxi Driver. But Taxi Driver has soul where this film has none.
Yeah, I honestly agree. And I actually really like how the film introduces Joker. Okay, first of all, also to touch on what you were saying as well with having a stance,
Mhm.
that was another big issue for me in this, is like he doesn't stand for anything.
Right.
And that just didn't really make sense to me in terms of like Joker. Like he even has this line that I was talking about this with my brother, and he pointed this out, and I thought it was really interesting how when he's on the talk show with Murray at the end, spoiler alert, he's like going on this rant, and he says nobody's civil anymore. And that line stood out to me, and I was so glad he brought it up as well, because I was like, that is not Joker. Like,
Yeah.
he doesn't want things to be civil. And then I had to be like, okay, this isn't that Joker. But then I'm like, is it even Joker? If you know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does. It does make sense. And that was kind of what I was.
Me so much.
That was what I was thinking this time where I watched it, where I was like, there's no reason for this movie and this character to be called Joker. It feels like
there's none.
It feels like Todd Phillips had an idea for this script, or Warner Brothers was like, here, Todd Phillips, make a dark Joker movie. And he wanted to say something else. And they're just like, I mean, if this script didn't have the Joker name attached to it and wasn't in the Batman zeitgeist, you have to wonder if it would even get greenlit.
Yeah. Honestly, for me, it just felt like Todd Phillips was caught up in too many ideas and themes, and like, is it the mental health struggle, or is it the King of Comedy thing where this guy wants to be a comedian and everyone's told him no, or is it that everything is going to shit in this world? Like, there was just too many ideas, and none of them were fully explored in the way that they should have been. And I think that's where this movie just fell apart. Like, for example, I love Zazie Beetz. I feel so bad how underutilized she was in this movie, because I think she's amazing and her character is ridiculous in this movie. I have no idea why she's why this character.
She has
exists.
No character. Yeah,
it's actually insane. Like, is it just to show that this guy is actually really crazy? It's like, well, we've been trying to establish that for the entire first hour. Like, I don't understand. I did not understand that at all this time around. It's just like you said, just kind of zero depth there. Even like, the Bruce Wayne connections felt so just like throwaways. Like, oh, I mean, okay. I was like,
they felt like studio notes. It's just like, you need to put Bruce Wayne in there. It's like, okay, god damn.
And like make the Waynes pieces of shit, so it's different.
Right.
I don't know. It didn't work for me the way that it did when I first watched it, I guess.
The sequel does, for the people who like this movie, it really does. If the sequel tries really hard to tear down what they like about this movie.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah.
It's really fascinating.
That is
I won't
hilarious.
say more because I know people want to check it out in the theaters, but it is interesting. So I have said a lot of, things about the movie and why it doesn't work for me. Those are my personal opinions. I'll tell you what does work for me is Joaquin Phoenix's performance. He is outstanding. His commitment to the role. I mean, he looks like he weighs 70 fucking pounds in this goddamn thing.
Scary,
it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And the scenes where he's having his PBA spells, there's some really interesting nuances in his performance there, because he's like got this uncontrollable laughter thing, but you could tell it's like he's in pain, like he's really hurting. Yeah. So there's strong work from Phoenix here, and he won the Academy Award, so God bless him. Like I think he deserved it. He did good work here. A lot of people did good work in this movie, but for me personally, it's like the more you think about it and analyze it, and maybe people are like, well, Nick, it's a comic book movie. It's like, they presented it as not a comic book movie. So if you're going to present a movie as this is real grounded shit, then I'm going to analyze it as real grounded shit. And as real grounded shit, it doesn't make a motherfucking lick of sense.
I totally agree. I think that was the exact experience that I had, because I was expecting to be like, oh, I'm so excited to revisit this movie. And then the more I analyzed it, the more I was like, what what is happening in this movie? Like, what is even going on? But like you said, Joaquin is just amazing. And I wanted to shout out to, like you were saying in those, the laughing spells, how much of a callback that is to the Conrad Veidt in The Man Who Laughs. Like it's really fun to look up because he has this kind of like crinkled face and his hand is over his mouth. And when he removes it, he's got this really freaky smile. And I thought Joaquin did such an amazing kind of tribute to that, but then made it entirely his own thing and personal to this specific character and what he's going through. And like you were saying, the nuances of those moments too, like where he starts choking or like gagging and burping, that was just brilliant. Like, give the man his Oscar. 100%. Very, very well deserved.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'm also kind of in the minority. Like a lot of people really love this movie, and more power to them. I get it for a superhero movie. If you watch a lot of superhero movies, you're like, whoa, this is totally different. This is so unique. And it's like, for a superhero movie, it is. For a movie, it's not.
yeah, exactly.
For a movie, it's filled with plot holes, and there's a lot of fat. How many goddamn slow motion dance sequences do we need to see? Jesus Christ. Let's go to the next fucking scene here. Shit.
Yeah, I feel like I'm really hating on this movie, but I want our listeners to know that I would never hate on anyone who does love this
if
movie.
you dig it,
like,
good.
That's great.
Yeah.
I support it. Yeah. But it's just not my cup of tea anymore, unfortunately.
Not my cup of tea. Not only is it not my cup of tea, it's that, this is tea and I'm a coffee drinker.
There you go. Exactly. That's a wrap on our episode today. Jokers are wild. We've touched on Jack Nicholson, Heath Ledger, Joaquin Phoenix, all three fantastic performances and really fun films at the same time. This was such a fun little exercise. Hopefully we've inspired our listeners to either check out these three films all together for the first time or revisit them again. We'd love to hear what you guys think of these three Jokers, and we'd love to hear who's your favorite, even outside of these three.
Yeah, we mentioned Mark Hamill and Cesar Romero. There's also
maybe Jared Leto's your favorite.
Maybe some people like the Jared Leto deal. Let us know. And we also want to hear what you think of Joker Folie à Deux.
Yes, please. I'm really excited to hear everyone's thoughts on that. So yeah, you can either comment your favorite Joker and your thoughts on the movies on our Instagram at Gimme Three Podcast. That's just GIMME spell out 3 podcast. Or you can even just directly message us through the send us a text feature. So if you scroll down in the episode description, you'll find that link and you can text us there. Feel free to send us your own movie recommendations as well, or if you have any fun episode ideas, themes you'd like to hear on the podcast in the future. We always love to get feedback from y'all. And if you're enjoying our podcast and you want to help us reach even more cinephiles like you, we'd love for you to download our episodes on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to us. It's just a super easy way to support the show and make sure that you never miss out on the next episode. You can also subscribe to our Patreon. It's just $5 a month. We drop some awesome episodes each month where we pitch 3 hidden gems that we discovered in the last month. They're completely spoiler free. So if that sparks your interest, you can scroll on down to our episode description and subscribe right there. Shout out to all of our listeners and our subscribers. Thank you so, so much. Your support genuinely means the world to us. Alrighty, Nick, tell our lovely listeners where they can find you on the socials.
You can find me on Letterboxd at Nicholas Ibarra. You can find me on Instagram at Nicholas Ibarra. You can find me on Twitter, also known as X, at Nicholas P. Ibarra. And the P stands for, what does the P stand for?
Phoenix.
Phoenix. There you go. Phoenix.
Yes, and you guys can find me on Instagram at Portrait of a Cinephile or on Letterboxd at Beth Stratus. That's just B and then my last name, F Stratus. Anyways, once again, thank you for joining us on the Gimme Three podcast, and we'll see you at the movies.